Welcome, it's Power 105.1. This is the New Era show, and I go by Art. Today, we're joined by a very special guest, Nadya Okamoto. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have you. First, before we dive into everything, I like to ask everybody that I talk to, this simple question. If you can think of something that you've done, within the last 24 hours or 48 or 3 days, whatever it is, something that has been on your mind and you can relive that moment again, whatever that thing is, what would it be and why?
I went on a run yesterday.
Okay.
And I got like a great runner's high. I posted in Prospect Park.
Okay.
Where suddenly all your pain and your worries go away and you're just in the moment, and that's a feeling I like to chase in kind of everything I do.
Yeah. Why is that? Actually, I'll let you explain why. Why is that a feeling?
Because, I got into marathon running last year.
Okay.
And so I've done 6 so far this year, which has been kind of wild. But I think that there's this feeling with runner's high specifically where it took so much dedication and pain and discipline to get there. And you're kind of reaching these goals in a really tangible way. And I think unlike in the startup journey, when the goalpost keeps moving and moving, with running races, there's a finish line, right? And so I think with training, like the feeling of runner's high and being able to really measure where you are to your goals, to me, is like such a rewarding feeling.
Okay. I like that. I've never heard anyone describe it like that. I did track in college. I don't know if I got that same feeling, but I think I think I understand. I understand what you're saying. Today, we'll start with some messages that I took from the book. My first question to you is, if when you look back and from when you first started, the movement, your menstrual movement, when you first started with, your period power book, have you noticed any progress in menstrual products, being more accessible for women who need it the most? Have you noticed any change yet?
Yeah, I mean, so I started all my advocacy in the period health space 10 years ago, so I was 16. And I would say back then, period poverty wasn't as much a widely used term, right? And I think that there are so many academics and activists that I've sort of been working alongside over the last decade who really started using terms like the menstrual movement and period poverty. And I still get questions today, like, what is period poverty? Every single day I'm meeting people who've just never thought of it before. And so I think that first and foremost, like the language or just awareness that this is something to think about is tremendously progressed. At the same time, like we've seen legislative progress as well. So the tampon tax, which is a sales tax on period products, considering them non-essential goods, 10 years ago, that existed in 40 states. Now it's in 18, right? So we've made incredible progress there. Also, period products being available in schools, that is legislation that's being replicated. Food stamps, we're working on it, but food stamps and different SNAP benefit programs finally cover period products more in comparison to 10 years ago when I didn't at all, right? So I think that we've really been able to see that progress. I also started a business in the period care space after writing the book. So I say, for me, all the research I did in the book actually made me very passionate about starting a social enterprise to kind of create a flywheel effect that produced products to be donated at the same time that people were purchasing them as they need to.
Yeah. And can you actually give a definition for it, just for those who are tuning in and don't understand it? What is period poverty? Because you do talk about it in the book, and I do have a question pertaining to it, but just to give a little information to people who are not aware.
Period poverty is just the inability to afford access to period products. So just as someone who might be struggling to afford basic necessities like shelter, food, same thing with period products, right? Like someone who has sort of a 4 to 6 day flow, as you would say, on a monthly basis, that can be $15 to $20 a month in terms of the products you need to buy. And I think only in the last few years, we've actually been able to see real research being done on the scale of this issue, particularly in the US. Like the first citywide study found that, 40% of low-income women had to actively choose between a meal and period products, right? Like this is something when someone is trying to afford basic necessities that can come at an opportunity cost to affording other necessities. And so it's just as someone who might be struggling to afford other necessities, period products just as much should be counted in that sort of bucket of necessities.
You talked about the Trump administration in the book, and right now we're seeing how scary it is, especially with the cuts to Medicare. So I wanted to ask you, how do you see this making period poverty, I guess, worse for people out there with this administration?
I mean, I would say that affordability in general was probably, we hear that a lot in the progressive movement of just wanting to create better lives for people to afford like the things that they need, right? And I think that like the tampon tax actually to me is like such a clear example of how legislation can bucket period products as non-essential. Like this is literally, these states, they are considering like Rogaine and Viagra to be more medical necessities than period products, right? And that's like erectile dysfunction and hair growth, And so for us, it's like, well, period products should be one of the most necessitated products. And so as we think about affordability and what do we prioritize and making sure that they're accessible, like that is absolutely a bucket as well. I think it's also supporting, young menstruators, young women, the kind of language that we use. I also think, how do we create a world in which people feel comfortable and confident to talk about their periods in a way that they don't think will be held against them, right? And so, there's a ton of viral videos in the world of women's sports right now of men betting on if female athletes are on their period or not, if that's going to like affect their performance, right? And I think that's one microcosm example of like period stigma being held against people with periods, right? And that's kind of something we really want to fight against.
Yeah. And I want to take it back real quick because this was something I found interesting to hear you talk about in the book. But, you mentioned being in your sex ed class was gender segregated, and that made me curious since there's no federal requirement for sex education. Do you think making it one would help close that gap?
I do think it should be required some sort of sex ed. That being said, I think one of the challenges is like what is taught in sex ed. Right? Like I was still taught even in Portland, Oregon, which is like the most progressive of politically, but cities, like that abstinence was like the guaranteed way not to get pregnant, right? It was kind of held up there as the example. So I think absolutely having some sort of national requirement for sex ed would be amazing. But it then goes to like, what is taught in that sex ed, right? Is it transphobic? In which case, like, that's not such a good idea, right? And I think that what we are seeing, like legislation on a state-based level prevent comprehensive sex ed, right? So there's House Bill 1069 that happened in Florida a couple years ago, and it literally made it so that sex education, comprehensive sex ed was not allowed to be taught in schools before grade 9. Like, it just wasn't allowed. Wow. And like, that's an issue because people are getting their periods like grade 4 or 5, right? And so I think that it kind of goes into, this is education and information, and like why I wanted to write the book and why I care so much about making content education with this is that people have the right to know about their bodies. And I feel like I talk to menstruators every single day and will interview them about their first period stories, and like to hear so many of, oh, I started bleeding out of my vagina and I had no idea what it was. Like I just had never heard of it, never talked about it, didn't know what to expect. Like that's such a terrifying feeling as a young child. And so I think that's what we really want to be able to overcome is like, how do you have the information you have, when you get your first period, but then also how do you live in a world in which you can ask for what you need? Right. And so kind of going back to like, how does the overall healthcare system affect us is like, your period and tracking your period, understanding your period can tell you so much about your overall health, right? It's not just about blood coming out. It's like related to endometriosis and uterine fibroids and other health things that you really need to get extra care for, right? And so I think there's a direct tie-in with knowing your period, talking about it, living in a world in which you can ask for that help and then be met with the support that you need.
Yeah. And I'm curious, at what do you, if you can be more specific, I don't want to say age, but I guess what year in the education system do you think they should start giving that information out?
I can empathize with like why this is sort of a controversial thing, like sex ed schools, right? Because I think for some maybe parents, it can be very nerve-wracking just like talking about genitalia in schools in general, right? And your period is so inherent to like knowing your body as someone assigned female at birth. And so I think that, the average age to get your first period is age 10. I do think that it should be taught before or right around that time. I think that there's curiosity already happening. And I think it's really important because people should be able to get their periods and know what to do, right? Know that they're not like bleeding out. And getting your first period can already be scary. And I think that, you want to sort of arm this next generation of menstruators with a feeling of empowerment rather than embarrassment.
Yeah. And what do you say to, because your mother was very encouraging to you, as you describe in your book, she was just open with sharing information with you. But what do you say to those parents who are hesitant, and they want to reserve that for, a later age or something like that? But to that, what do you say?
I mean, I think that the nature of periods is like the average age is 10, right? Okay. Meaning that your daughter, your child will probably hear about it already, whether it be in pop culture, from classmates. Like, I remember the first time a girl got her period, like when I was in 4th grade, like people talked about it. People knew, the girls knew at the bathrooms, right? It was something that is going to be there. And so I think that the curiosity already exists. So it's about like, how do you get your child information that is accurate and helpful, right? And I think another thing that I hope for is that in parental systems, like human life exists because someone got a period, right? Mm-hmm. So the mom had to have gotten a period at some point in their life, probably actively gets one. So I think it empathize with what it's like to get your period and not know what's happening. And I think you want your child to feel prepared and feel ready. I also think that there is also a responsibility where if parents don't think that they're going to be educated in school about this, how do they educate themselves too? Okay. And like I've done this content series interviewing parents like on the street, where I've interviewed them and they said, I don't think sex ed should be taught in schools. It has to be taught at home. And then I'll ask them, okay, well then can you draw me a uterus or tell me what a period is? And they have no idea, right? And so I think that it's not just like this new generation that we're failing in terms of sex ed. It's like every generation before, my generation and before, which means that the parents don't often know either. Mm-hmm. Like we talk to so many grown menstruators who are learning for the first time that like your pee and your period blood come out of 2 separate holes. And like that in and of itself can be new information for some adults, right? And so I think it's just kind of a wake-up call for parents to be like, if not schools, then who is giving that accurate information? And like what resources are you using to teach them?
Now, there was another thing about the book that drew my curiosity. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned that the word vagina can actually be considered misogynistic.
I think it's something that people have talked about, the etymology of the word. Okay. So it's that I'm fascinated by like the history of some of the language. Mm-hmm. So basically, like the etymology behind the word penis, it tracks back to a root that means sword. Okay. And vagina, vulva tracks back to the root word that means she, right? And so there is some history that, even if you look at the roots of these words, that it was kind of vagina, female genitalia, the words loop back into like protecting or caring for male genitalia. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's just something that I love to like point out, because I think that in my fascination with just all language related to menstruation, like you question everything. Like why does stigma exist? How is it related to religion? And does that affect your religious beliefs? Maybe not, maybe it does, but it's just questions to ask.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, what are things that you're questioning right now?
I mean, so I grew up Jesuit Catholic, and then I read the Bible like in full when I was in college, and I took a lot of issue with like how menstruation or reproductive health is like brought up in the Bible, even at the beginning with Genesis, right? Menstruation is posed, painful childbirth is posed as like a punishment to Eve for sin, right? And that's in like the opening of the Old Testament. And so I think for me, I think that I've, in the last couple of years, been on my own journey of trying to best understand, like, how do we interpret those things if they're, if it's up for interpretation, how does that align with different sects of Christianity? And, like, it just makes me question a lot of the beliefs that I grew up with. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of permission I've given myself, to really lean into, is just to be open to questioning these things and doing my research and having conversation.
Another thing I want to talk about is, and please, if I'm saying it wrong, correct me. Is it Caminos of Care? Camions of Care.
That was the original name for this like nonprofit that I started. Since rebranded in 2017 to period.org. And it's still growing in a new leadership. But it's a nonprofit that I started when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. That was all about bringing people together to collect period products, redistribute them, do student advocacy around achieving menstrual equity. And so I led that organization for about 6 years and then wrote the book, and I now run a period product company called August. We make tampons and pads for available online at Target, at Whole Foods. So I've kind of jumped into the business world because I think when I was writing the book, a lot of the research that I did for the book made me really feel that the capitalist industry of period care was responsible for like the state of not only period care, but accessibility and stigma. Things that I think the industry is responsible for and has the opportunity to change it. So I sort of hopped on the business bandwagon like 5 years ago.
Now, talk about what's unique about August. Like what, I mean, you just described some of it, but what are other things that you all do to support?
We make non-toxic, super comfy products, but for every purchase, we're also donating a couple pads. And so to date, they donated around 400,000 products, and we'll keep doing that. And I think also just using our platform to do as much education as possible, because again, if it's not taught in schools and maybe not taught in homes, like I do think a brand is one of the first places a young menstruator will go for answers, because their first interaction is needing to buy products, right? And so we do a lot of education, whether it be content or otherwise as a brand, to support our community.
Yeah. Now, Saturday, this Saturday is World Menopause Day, and part of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation also, I'm not calling you an expert or anything, and I don't want people to, I mean, if you want to carry that title, you can, but I just don't want to put that weight on you. I feel like you're just sharing information, which is why I'm excited to have you here. But I feel like, the menstrual movement has included, the perimenopause and the menopause as well. So can you describe what a perimenopause is and then what menopause is?
I mean, I still feel like I'm learning. I feel like there's still so much research to be done. But basically, there's perimenopause, which is sort of it can be many, many years before someone has officially reached menopause, which is when you no longer fit a period. The average age, I believe, is 51 for when you stop getting a period. But perimenopause includes, like, I believe, over 30 symptoms. And it can be everything from what we hear a lot about, hot flashes, to dryness. And so perimenopause, like, people should start learning about it. And I think about, even for me, I'm like late 20s, but like people can experience perimenopause or symptoms of it starting in their 30s, right? And so that's kind of age agnostic. But I think that as we've done more research as a society, we've recognized that it's not just a light switch, right? It's not just you get a period and then 1 month you don't, right? It's like a process, and that includes many, many symptoms, and that for centuries, menstruators have just had to go through on their own. So I think World Menopause Day, which is this Saturday, is really all about just raising awareness and opening that conversation, because there is so much stigma around getting older, especially as a woman, not getting your period, what that means for your quote unquote womanhood. And I think that it's a conversation that needs to be had for sure.
Yeah. And I wonder how that, when we talk about period products being in some schools, some high schools, some middle schools, and then some workplace. I don't want to say all, some workplace. How can that same awareness, for, menopause, how can they apply that same awareness for menopause for women in the workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that a lot of it is just having open conversations and sort of support for different symptoms, right? People's experience with perimenopausal symptoms can look so different across the board. And just like we are trying to create more inclusive workplaces of people's experiences with period cramps, I think the same goes for other symptoms of perimenopause. So yeah, I think it's an ongoing conversation, and I'm like very, very in awe. There's so many incredible organizations doing work sort of in the menopausal space too. My
last question to you is, how can anyone that's listening, how can we show up as support system?
I mean, I think it's doing exactly what you're doing, which is like having open conversations. Like, the fact that you read Period Power is like so amazing to me, and like supporting the menstruators in your life. Like, I think one of the most romantic thing a boyfriend can do is like buy period products for your girlfriend or vice versa. And I think that just creating these open conversations, but also when you think about donating products, whether it be like cans of food or whatever to your local shelter, like include period products in that, right? And I think also just buy from brands that you can really trust and really question like the products that you're using. And then also amazing organizations like period.org that are doing work to support and end period poverty too.
Perfect. Nadya, thank you so much for your time. And everyone else, like you said, I hope you all, we can show up in whatever, in some way, shape or form. I hope if we can do it, I hope you, just take the time out of your day to do so. And thank you everyone for tuning in. This is the New Era Show on Power 105.1. I go by Art, and we'll see y'all. All right. Peace.